Hey, what's up guys? My name is Alec Timmons and today we're going to be doing brakes on a Porsche 944 Turbo. But it's not this car, it's this one. The condition of these brakes, they're not that bad on this side. They're pretty rusty, but over here there's a little problem. As you can see, this is pretty bad. Alright guys, so this is what you're gonna need for the brakes. Obviously the rotors were bad, so I ordered some drilled rotors which are cadmium plated, I believe. Anyway, it'll resist rust, which is obviously what this car needs. We live in Houston and oxidation and corrosion is pretty pertinent with the ocean being so close. So we've got a set of semi-metallic pads, new sensors, and then new rotors. And I will be inspecting the calipers for function, and I'll be cleaning them. And these are 4-piston Brembos from the factory. I'll be cleaning them up, making sure the pistons slide okay, and I'll be bleeding the system afterwards. And it should be working like brand new once I'm done. Okay, so this is the first thing that I'm gonna do. I filled up my bucket with water, and I have the grit guard in there. Well, it's actually the Cyclone dirt trap, but they're the same thing. It keeps any of the heavy contamination from the dirt of anything you clean at the bottom of the bucket, so it doesn't get back on your brushes or your wash mitt, and it keeps all that separated so you don't scratch anything. So I'm going to attack this project today first by cleaning it. I'm going to first spray it down with some Code Red, which actually eats away at brake dust. It's made for wheels, but anything you clean with a wheel would be good for this system too, because your caliper is coated the same way as a wheel, which would be powder coating. So I'm going to attack it with some Code Red, and it sprays on green, but once it starts eating at the brake dust, then it'll start turning red. It's actually just dripping black right now because it's pulling so much junk off. Get that in there, and we'll let that set. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is get my detailer brush and soak it down with some Code Red. There's a lot of products on the market that work similarly, and they're all great. I know Adams Polishes, Car Pro, the Chemical Guys, and Ammo products all work very similarly, and they all do a great job. I think everybody finds a product they like and then they stick to it. For me, as long as it does the job, I don't care which one it is. So just really want to clean all this, get in the back. This thing's been sitting for quite some time. It's really cleaning it up too, actually. It's looking a lot better. And for those nooks and crannies, rinse off my brush. I just wet this brush. It's a wheel brush. Soak it. And now we can get in between here and really scrub that down. And I will be scrubbing this all down again once everything's taken off. But this is just the initial cleaning to get the majority of it off. I clean everything before I work on it. Some people will strongly agree with me, and some people will say that's a huge waste of time. So I'm going to rinse it off and then start the disassembly process. Now, before I get too far ahead of myself, I'd like to just note that a lot of people, when they think of cleaning a brake system, they'll grab a can of brake cleaner and just start going at it. They'll just spray everything. And in many cases, and most cases, that is probably okay. But this time, I'm gonna give it a thumbs down. A lot of times, chlorinated brake cleaner, such as this, will dry out the powder coating or paint on, or whatever finish you have, and it really attacks the finish on it. So it does a great job at cleaning, but you can damage the finish on this thing. And I'm gonna assume that the customer doesn't want to refinish or repowder coat these calipers. So we're going to do it the safe way and use pH balanced cleaners, such as our, just an all-purpose wheel cleaner, and this one's pH balanced. Car Pro Iron X, this stuff's great. It'll pull iron contaminants out of your paint. I'll be doing that once I'm actually pulling it off and cleaning everything. And of course the last product that I used, and that's just a lot better. Normally I will use this in a brake job, or whatever. This one's just non-chlorinated, but it's still pretty harsh. I'll use it actually on the brake surface, so the actual friction surface, whether it's on your pads or on your rotors, then that's okay to use on here. But as far as a nice shiny painted or powder coated surface, then I'd stay away from it just to be safe. Okay guys, so what we're going to be doing next is unloading the calipers. Now what I've done is I've turned the steering wheel and made it so this area is a little bit more exposed. It's better for the camera and better for you. So basically what unloading the caliper means is taking the brake pads out. What you want to do is, after you've gotten this clip out of the way, you'll want to relieve the pressure off your brake pads by either prying on it with a screwdriver or a pry bar, kind of in between your pads and your rotor. If you're reusing your rotor, make sure you don't scratch it. Just, be careful, be smart about it, because if you're going to be preserving anything and doing it properly, you don't want to just be jabbing at it. But the goal is you've got 4 pistons in here, and you kind of want them to compress, and that'll relieve the pressure. After that, you can loosen your wire here and loosen it up here, and that will enable you to pull these brake pads outward. So you've got your brake pad, and it'll just slide up and out. And after that, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the actual caliper itself, which isn't that difficult. I've got a 19mm socket here with an extension. You might not need an extension, but there's 2 big bolts back here, one here and one here. You're going to have to trust me, they're there. And you're going to put your socket on there and use a breaker bar or something. If you're really strong, just break it loose and get both of those bolts out. That will completely release your caliper. And after that, you'll want to move your caliper out and put it over here. Obviously there's nothing here because you need to hang it. The reason why we hang it is because this brake line can be damaged if you hang the caliper by the brake line. Also, these cars are old, so you want to make sure that you're not putting a lot of stress on these brake lines, because they'll crack and break. This one looks to be in really good shape. It might have been replaced sometime in the past. So we're going to preserve this one and reuse it, but I will clean it up. Okay, so I made a mistake about how to pull the clip off right here. I was understanding it incorrectly. Basically, you have this clip here, you don't push it together. That actually just stays in there and swivels. What you want to do is, it's actually held in up here, and what you want to do is simultaneously squeeze this. There's probably a couple ways to do it, but I squeezed this down with some pliers, and then pushed this with a flathead, and it was able to, there's kind of a clip right here, and I pushed it back and then down, and now I was able to relieve the pressure. Anyway, so what I did is I kind of just loosened it out, pulled it, and then had this part needs to come down, and that releases it from here. Squeeze it together and it all pops out, everything just comes out. Now what I'm going to do, since I'm a clean freak, instead of pulling the caliper off, is I'm just going to clean all inside of here, just to make my life a little bit easier because it's stationary. Alright guys, so I've already went ahead and cleaned the caliper while it was on the spindle, and it looks not too bad. Maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. It's fairly clean, but I will be cleaning it again. I like to be able to eat off of things when I'm done with them. And you can still see there's some residue here, brake dust and grease and road grime and all that junk. So I'm going to be getting that off as well as possible. Also, what I've done is I've hung it by the thread right here. This thing's not too heavy, it's an aluminum caliper, so I'm not worried about it damaging anything. I've just got some aluminum welding rod, but you can use a wire or a rope or something as long as it's strong enough, and then I've attached it up here, which is perfectly fine. And then I have a rag behind here, so in case this thing does bounce or slide, it won't scratch the finish. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that right now. Alright, I'm back and I have scrubbed this thing down twice again, and it's significantly better. You can actually see some shine, and it's nice. I would eat off of it. While I was down here, I've also sprayed all this down with some wheel cleaner and a degreaser, and I used my wheel brush, this one, and I just scrubbed everything back here. Got a lot of the corrosion and oxidation off. You know, it's not perfect, but it's clean, which is nice. It's nice to know that you've got a clean car, and you know, once you clean it, you can see that you've got, you know, maybe rusty spots or just surface rust or damages or dents, previous accident stuff. It's always nice to expose everything down to its real state when it's not covered up by junk. I guess while I'm back here, those two 19mm bolts, that's where they were. And then obviously they'll go right there. I've just wiped this down with a microfiber cloth. I'm pretty sure you remember what it looked like. It was pretty bad. This thing's not going to look like a new caliper. It's 30-something years old, but if you can make it feel fresh and pretty, I'd say go for it. Okay, through the magic of video editing, I've done the hard part. This one, we are going to unscrew these two screws right here. There's one here and one here, and that is our next step. So let's say you want to unscrew it. Well, you go here and you start. Okay, this one's already loose, but you start and it kind of just like, oh. So what I've done is I have carefully put a pry bar here, and now it doesn't spin. I used a multitude of different screwdrivers that I have from various sizes. We've got a couple others, and they weren't grabbing, and I was afraid of rounding that off. And I don't feel like getting my tap and die kit out, nor my angle grinder. This thing might save your life. This is I don't know what it's called, a hammer screwdriver thing. You put it in there, hit it with a hammer, make sure you have it set to the right direction. And what happens is the impact, it has a swivel in here, and it transfers the vertical force to a rotational force, and it will twist it. So that's what I did. I had to hammer this, and went boom a couple times while applying left-hand pressure, so you know, lefty-loosey, and it was able to get them loose. And now they're done. So be very careful when taking these off, and expect to have to use or buy one of these. Hopefully you can rent one locally though, if you don't have one. Alright, so your next step after removing those two screws is to simply slide the rotor off. With it being an old car, the rotor probably won't want to come out. So what I've done was I've gotten a hammer. I should have used a bigger hammer than this. This thing's like, I don't know, an 8-ounce. It's pretty pathetic. And I just used a cloth, so you know, if you have hearing protection, then no need. But I just smacked around the edges of it, and I came to the back, and eventually it loosened it up enough to make it come free. And so once you get it off, you're at your home stretch. This thing you can throw like a frisbee, or recycle it, or stare at it, or do whatever you want with it. But it is trash now. Or if you prefer, if it isn't trash, you can get it turned and resurfaced. This one is clearly bad. It's corroded. It has some pretty heavy wear marks. I'm sure it's warped. But, you know, rotors are not cheap. We all know that. So, especially Porsche parts and 944 parts. If you can, you know, if you measure it and it's still within spec and it's not too thin, I would recommend getting it turned and resurfaced. And, you know, save some money. Next, guess what I'm going to do? Yep, I'm going to clean it. I'm going to clean this whole area. It looks gross to me. After I clean it, what I'll do is I'll get the new shiny gold rotor that I have, and I'll use some brake clean, because that's fine, and I'll clean the whole area with it with a clean, fresh towel with no grease on it. Because when you get them, normally they're covered with a light coat of oil so they don't rust. So you want to get all that oil off, because you don't want to introduce it into your new brake pads, because then you're just gonna have to start all over with new parts. So get that preserving oil off with brake cleaner. Okie dokie, so it's time to install the new rotor. I've already lightly misted some brake cleaner on it and got a paper towel and wiped it down. Make sure you don't forget the back. And you want to make sure that you you find out the correct direction or rotation of your rotors before you put them on. As per the manufacturer's recommendations, this one has these this pattern rotating this way. So before you just slap it on, you want to make sure you locate your two screw holes. They're right here and here. So, and also you can see there's a residual mark right there, and that's where this one is too. In fact, I just realized that I'm kind of an idiot. I forgot I did a Porsche 930 not too long ago. And let me just throw this on here really quick. I just got all mixed up. Okay. So let's slide that on there. The reason why you have these is to thread in a bolt about 1 inch long, maybe a little longer if you want. I forgot the thread pitch. That's probably like an M10 by 1.25 or something like that. Thread it in there, and what happens is it kind of acts like a pulley-puller, but in this case it's a you have a built-in rotor puller, so you don't have to hammer on the rotor surface. I didn't mind that because those rotors were trash. If you're trying to reuse the rotor, I would definitely recommend going this route. So you screw the bolt in, and it'll actually pull the rotor off. So just a little bit of food for thought. So I'm going to pull this off and put a tiny bit of anti-seize in here, just a tiny bit. You don't want too much for it to sling, and I'm going to put a tiny thin film right here, and I'm going to throw that back on and then tighten down those screws. And also, if those screws were damaged when you took them off, make sure you replace them. Mine are in pretty good shape, so I'm going to reuse them. Okay guys, I've got the new rotor on there. Like I said, very thin film of anti-seize. That's just a precautionary step. It's not required. And if you did have to replace these screws, make sure you get properly countersunk screws with flat heads. You don't want the button head, because it could potentially protrude out and obstruct a proper mating surface between your wheel and your brake rotor. So make sure that doesn't stick out in any way. I just tightened those by hand, and then once they got snug, just a little more. You don't want them really on there too tight, because remember, your wheel actually holds your rotor on there anyway once you torque everything down. So you just want to make sure those don't back out. With that being said, right now is a good time to check your wheel bearing, since you don't have any resistance on it. You know, you don't have your brake pads running up against it. Sorry, you won't be able to hear this because somebody's doing their lawn, but spin it and listen to it. And this one sounds beautiful. I don't feel any play. It feels really good. No noises. It's obviously been repacked or rebuilt recently, so I'm going to call these good. But if you do notice any of that, you can pop these off, and maybe I'll do another video later on about how to re-grease your wheel bearings and possibly replace them if they need it. Alrighty, so I've thrown the caliper back on. It's super simple. You just grab it and put it this way. Yep, just as simple as that. And then throw those two 19mm bolts in. Now what we want to do is torque it correctly. You want to torque those two bolts to 63 foot-pounds. So we've got 63 on the dial. And you just torque till it clicks. They're not tight yet. That's just the ratcheting mechanism. Alright, it stopped, and that's one. We'll do it twice. Okay, so that one's torqued. Now let's go to the top one. Okay. Nope, not yet. Alright. And there you go. So with your 19mm socket torque wrench to 63 foot-pounds, you got those in there. And now what we can do is start lightly greasing the sides of the pads right here. Just a tiny bit. And a little bit in here. Make sure you do not let it touch the pad surface, nor do you want to let it touch the rotor surface, because grease is an anti-friction material and you want friction. So let's not mix the two. So what I'm going to do is get some brake grease and just lightly put grease here, because what happens over time is as your pads wear out and every time you apply your brakes, they'll slide in further and further. So you don't want anything getting stuck or frozen. You want everything to be nice and fluid in there and working all nice and smoothly. Alright, so I've noticed that with the new kit, it only comes with one sensor. In theory, that's okay, as long as your pads aren't stuck. So basically what you do is to install the sensor, you will get there's a fatter side and then there's a thinner side. The fatter side will go on the pad side. And then it's got this little clip and it fits in this groove right here. So you just slide it in there. No need for lubricant or anything. No pun intended. And it clips in firmly and it won't come out. So don't put it in incorrectly. And then what we'll do is lose all our parts. I'll be right back. Alrighty, I'm back. So what we want to do is get a little bit of grease and just lightly put a layer of grease on it. Very lightly. Notice I still have a lot of grease back on my finger. You don't want to put it all on this thing. Okay, so by choice, I'm going to put the pad without the sensor on the outside. And what I've done also is I've lightly greased these surfaces right here. There's metal plates inside of here, steel plates. I've lightly greased them with this pick. And I made sure that it's just a thin film and I didn't get any on the rotor surface. So what I'm going to do now is slide that one in there, and that one's good. And now I'm going to do the same thing with my other one with the sensor, my other pad with the sensor. See if there's too much, just wipe it off. And now that one I'm going to put on the inside, just because I personally think it looks a little cleaner. What we'll do next is I will slide this one over here. Make sure you don't want to tug on it too hard. Okay, that's good. It's got a little bit of slack, so it's got flexibility. I'll even push a little bit extra, so over time, once it squeezes together, it won't be tugging on the wire. And then we'll come up here, and it doesn't look like there's any special polarity, but before I plug it in, I'm going to get some O-ring lube, which is non-petroleum based lubricant and sealer, and it will prevent any moisture from getting inside of here to prevent any reliability issues, and it'll also make it easier to service in the future. So I'm going to go do that. Can you see it? Parker O-ring lube. This stuff is about $18 a tube, and it's worth every cent. It's a lot like petroleum jelly, except for it's not crap. So we'll just put some O-ring lubricant right there, and that will allow it to have a much better seal, and if we ever need to unplug it in the future, it'll come unplugged as well, easily. So just slide that in there any which way, and it stops. Place that right there, make sure nothing's obstructed and it looks good, and we can then, sorry, let's twist it this way. Let's sit it in there. That looks good, nothing's hitting, and close that, and it's locked, and everything is good. Now what I'll do is reinstall that clip, which is right here, and then I will come back to you with that installed. Okay, so I just caught myself. I realized that if I were to install this clip, that it would have pinched the wire in between right here. So what I've done is pop this out, and yes, it did pop out very easily, probably because I had that lubricant there, and I just fed the wire through the clip. So now I've got the wire through the clip, and all you're really going to do is, you put it, squeeze it together, you'll bring it together, squeeze it like that, pops in, feed that through, up here, and then with both hands and thumbs right there, boom, that's clipped in, your brake pads are secure, your wire is good, put some slack in it, okay, that feels good right there, and throw it all back together. And at this point, you will do an inspection. I would highly recommend it. So, what have we done here? We've cleaned everything. New brake pads. This is torqued. This is tight. This spins. You're going to hear a little bit of rubbing there. That's simply because we have your pads in there now. This is tight. That looks good. This looks great. There's nothing pinching, nothing binding. At this point, you can either slap it together, obviously do the other side, do it exactly the same way. Don't forget to pump your brakes, because remember, this is expanded, your caliper. You need to pump your brakes so your pads actually touch the mating surface of your rotor. If not, you're going to be backing out of the driveway or going down the street, and you're not going to have brakes after a couple pumps. So do it while you're not moving. This car has been sitting for a long time, so I'll be getting my lovely assistant out here, aka my beautiful wife, and we will be bleeding the brakes. And remember, there's 2 bleeders on this caliper because it feeds the brake fluid through here. So I will be putting .4 brake fluid in it, which is perfectly compatible with .3, but I'll probably be flushing the whole system and just putting .4. It's got a little bit higher temperature resistance, so that'll be a nice touch for this car. So yeah, anyway, I appreciate you guys watching the video, and I really hope that this was useful. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Just leave them below. And if you like what you see, like and subscribe. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.